Welcome to the Resilient Retail Game Plan, a podcast for anyone wanting to start, grow or scale a profitable creative product business with me, Catherine Erdley. The Resilient Retail Game Plan is a podcast dedicated to one thing, breaking down the concepts and tools that I've gathered from 20 years in the retail industry and showing you how you can use them in your business. This is the real nuts and bolts of running a successful product business, broken down in an easy, accessible way. This is not a podcast about learning how to make your business look good. It's the tools and techniques that will make you and your business feel good. Confidently plan, launch and manage your products, and feel in control of your sales numbers and cash flow to help you build a resilient retail business. Welcome, it's the Resilient Retail Game Plan, and I'm your host, Catherine Erdley, as well as the founder of the Resilient Retail Club, which is my consultancy and membership group for product businesses. Did you know that as well as the membership, I also offer one-to-one services for everything from mentoring to power hours, as well as creating a complete strategy for you and your business. If you want to find out more, then come say hi at catherine@resilientretailclub.com or check out my website, resilientretailclub.com/work with me. Today's episode, I'm going to be sharing nine different ways for you to create an extraordinary customer experience. So why is this important? Well, you've probably, if you've listened to this podcast before, followed me on social media, you've heard me banging on about the importance of loyalty, the importance of your repeat customers, the importance of creating fans of your business as opposed to just looking for one-off sales. The profit in a business often comes from your loyalist customers, so you are going to ignore them at your peril. Often what people ask me about is, well, how do you actually get these loyal customers? How do you build this loyalty? And the good news is that while it can sometimes feel like everything's changing all the time, from the economic situation to social media and so on and so forth, the principles of good customer service are probably the same that they were 22 years ago when I started out in the retail industry as they are today. And what I always find really fascinating is that when I work on the whole subject of what's happening in the retail industry, so whether I'm writing a Forbes article about retail trends, whether I'm talking on a panel or on a podcast or in the media about what's happening in the retail industry and where it's going, people often come up with this term experiential retail. And it's kind of bandied around a lot. And if you've ever read anything much about the sort of retail industry forecast, that this word will always come up, experiential retail. And really it's about creating a great experience. And in my opinion, the best experience for a customer it's all about great customer experience. And one of my favorite examples about this is something that happened a couple of years ago now. I went to a future of retail concept, pop-up concept. It was a luxury clothing store. I had read about it, how they were doing this experiential retail pop-up. And I was very curious to check it out, as I'm always interested what's happening, what's new, what's supposedly cutting edge. And they had this multi-sensory installation. There was art or being projected in a room. So I arrived at the store and they basically said, oh yeah, it's upstairs. So they showed me into what was essentially a fairly large cupboard. And they projected this, it was art being projected on the walls, and there was sensory. So there was scent being pumped out and music. And this was, for them, like this experience that people could come and then enjoy and perhaps share on social media and this kind of thing. And it was absolutely fascinating to see that was their interpretation of what a customer experience in a retail space was. And I came out and I went next door to a company called T2, the letter T2, and which some of you may be familiar with. It's a tea company started in Australia. And I walked in and I was kind of having a look around, and the sales assistant walked over and they said hi, and they said, what kind of tea do you like? And I said, well, I quite like spicy chai. And she said, I'll brew you a cup. And she brewed me a cup of tea and we had a chat, and it wasn't at all high pressure sales. It was just a really great experience, a really great customer experience. And I ended up buying lots of tea. I did not buy any luxury fashion from the luxury fashion experiential installation, just so you know. But it's just something that really, for me, is the essence of good retail. And it's something I feel quite passionate about. And I get really irate when I have bad customer service experiences. And not, I hope, because I'm generally tetchy, but because I often think that so many of these fundamentals that I'm going to run through, they're not really about anything in particular other than just common human decency a lot of the time. And I think that we can all think of instances in our own lives when we've had a good customer experience and how quickly that can turn you into a real advocate for a brand. And when we've had a bad customer experience and how, you've probably gone and told all your friends or dined out on the story, if you like, for a long time over a poor experience. Whereas a good experience is something that is just so pleasant, so positive. And I believe it's not out of the reach, especially not for small businesses. So with that in mind, I wanted to run through some suggestions, 9 suggestions for helping you create a really extraordinary customer experience and how to delight your customers every time. So it's one of the most effective ways to not only drive your sales now, but also really to drive them in the future. I think, as I said, I believe that building loyalty and retaining customers is one of the most important things that we can do as business owners. And so creating good experience for them has got to be one of the easiest, best ways to future-proof our sales. So the first thing is, where can you do more? So what is it that you could do to go the extra mile? And I've seen a few different ways of people doing this. One of the things I like is where it's something unexpected. So upgrading every 20th customer to a different shipping, adding a little seasonal treat into your packages. I once worked with a flooring company that would send out chocolate bars in their sample envelopes. And actually, when I say work with them, I was actually buying from them. I was during a house renovation because they sent a little chocolate bar in the samples box. Then you could bet that when I was thinking about different samples, they were top of my mind. So how can you do this to stand out a little bit extra, especially at a time, like Christmas, things like that? And it doesn't have to be every customer. In fact, in a way, it's nice when it's unexpected. Last year on the podcast, I spoke to the sock company. That was their thing. They put sweets into every sock order that went out, had a packet of sweets in it. And again, over time, people come to expect that. But even if you're doing it sporadically, not in every order, because obviously that adds a bit of a cost, but just something unexpected, a nice little extra treat, something that your customers will really think, oh, that was nice. I just didn't really know that I was going to get that. The second thing I would say is saying hello. Social media obviously is a way that you can check in with your customers if you can see who it is who's bought from you, or just sending them an email. Of course, you can automate all of this, but it's really nice as well if you've been having a chat with somebody on social media, direct messages, and they buy from you. Do you go back and check in and just say hi, see how they're doing, see how they're enjoying it, if they like it, if they've got any questions? Again, as I said, this certainly can be automated, and it's great. It's a really good idea to have automated follow-ups built into your emails, that after somebody's purchased, you send them a note and ask them how it's doing. But absolutely, if you've had any kind of personal interaction with the customer during the purchase process, then why not find out how it is, how they're enjoying it, if they've got anything at all that you can help them with, if they need anything with care instructions or assembly instructions or anything at all. I think it's always a really good idea to just drop in and say hi, check in with your customers. Make sure that you're just being sociable. So it's not every communication then is about selling. If you reach out in a friendly way, it helps you stay top of their minds, and it will really set you apart, because it's very rare to get that kind of follow-up after somebody has made a sale. It's quite rare to hear from a company directly just to say, just checking in, seeing if you're happy with everything. The third thing I would say is be positive. Now, last week in the podcast, I did talk a lot about boundaries. And I feel like when I was reflecting back on the episode, I feel like a lot of what I talked about in boundaries was to do with customer service, so setting up expectations, setting up autoresponders and that kind of thing. But I think it all feeds into this idea of being positive. Because if you maintain a really positive tone across all your customer interactions, it definitely gives a different customer experience. And one of the quickest ways to risk letting your frustration show, because let's face it, customers can be really frustrating, is for it to be 10 o'clock at night and you're feeling burnt out and you're reading an email from a customer that maybe you shouldn't have looked at, and now you have got mad, or maybe your tone of your response is not perhaps as positive as you would like it to be. So I think it is really important, and this may sound far-fetched, but believe me, I've actually seen it happen more than once when people have said to me, I know that I've just got to sort out these boundaries, because I don't think I've ever come across anyone who's actually kind of lost it at a customer, but definitely allowed their tone to veer on the more frustrated end. And I'm not saying that there aren't customers out there who deserve or need a firm hand, because let's face it, we all know that there are always going to be people who make really unreasonable demands. But of course, from a professional standpoint, you always want to keep that level of calm and positivity and make sure that every single interaction that the business has with you is a positive one. So really, at all costs, avoid letting your frustration show. And I would say as well, and maybe this is slightly controversial, I don't know, but I do think it's a really interesting one, and something that I have had this discussion several times with people in the past. With social media, obviously, there's a big emphasis on showing the behind the scenes. And I think that that is absolutely true. I think that it's really fascinating to see the process, and it's really fascinating to see how things are being done, and for people to connect with you as a human being and all of these other things. But I also think that as the business owner, I would think carefully about allowing your frustrations to show on social media. So for example, if you bought something, just again, putting yourself in your customer's shoes, if you bought an item from a company and then you were watching on social media and the founder was talking about how they were so burnt out and overwhelmed and really dealt with a lot of frustrating customers or whatever it was, that just meant that they were feeling really basically on social media showing their frustrations. I think personally as a customer, I think that that for me always makes me feel a bit like, oh, okay, well, I felt like I was supporting them, but it seems like they're really stressed out or something like that. And I think, again, I'm not saying that we should say things that are all rosy if they're not, but I do think if you're on social media and you're a business owner, I would just think really, really carefully about the being positive, because you want all the interactions to be positive. And just to reflect, if you were buying from a company and you had made a purchase and then you saw the person behind that business really talking in depth about if their frustrations, how that would make you feel. So again, just going back to a good customer experience is also about having positive interactions with you as the business owner and with the business directly. So the fourth thing that I would say then is to plan ahead. So planning ahead means that over time, you'll understand the seasonality of your business, and you may also really start to understand the purchase cycle. So for example, do you have a product that is bought every year? So a diary, a calendar, something like that would be purchased. Or equally, Valentine's Day cards or Mother's Day cards, or something that people would be purchasing on a repeat basis. And how can you act not only in a positive way for your customers by offering them reminders, for example, but also to help you with your sales? So one of the examples I frequently use is the example of the Valentine's Day flowers. A florist that my husband has used in the past sent him an email a week or two before Valentine's Day and say, Valentine's Day is coming up. Would you like to order your Valentine's Day flowers? He's always like, yep, okay. It's nice and easy. They're beautiful flowers. So I'm happy. He's happy. The florist is happy. And all of that came from the florist understanding the purchase time frame, reaching out on not necessarily an individual basis, but definitely on a personalized basis. So they were looking at the customers who had previously bought Valentine's Day from them and sent them a reminder saying, oh yes, you bought these from us last year. Do you want to buy from us again? So I think for me, that is an epitome of where sales and customer service really goes hand in hand. But the basis of that is really you looking at your business and understanding it. You might have a product that perhaps has a longer repeat purchase. So if the products that you make are quite durable, which let's face it, a lot of people have A lot of small businesses have very high quality products, which means they're very durable. Then thinking about, okay, typically speaking, if a customer purchases this from us, like how long afterwards would they then need to replace it, or would they then need to purchase an aftercare product to help look after it? Or how long after they've had it and they've loved it might they be interested in buying another one, or recommending a friend, buying an alternative for a slightly different use? All of these different things are ways that you can think about your customer. And I honestly believe that that kind of selling is definitely really great customer experience, because as I said, my husband's delighted. He doesn't have to think about it. He gets a reminder. And there's lots of examples for me personally. If I have got something and there's a reminder that comes up that says, do you need more? And you think, actually, do you know what? Yes, I do. And I'd much rather you reminded me and I could order it and have it come in time than me to completely run out of something and then have to repurchase it and wait, or upgrade to express shipping or something because I'd forgotten that I needed it. So have a think about it. Have a think about what that might look like for your business. Maybe start gathering information, looking at things like purchase frequency. If you look at your best customers, how often do they come back? How often are they repeat purchasing, and what time frame? Could you almost start preempting that if people generally come every 4 months, could you send nudge reminders at 3.5 months, for example? Or if you feel like there are certain behaviors that start suggesting that somebody is doing something different. So, for example, if somebody buys one item from you, is there a chance that they might then come back and buy more? So, for example, if you're an underwear brand and people might buy one item because they want to try it out, could you then remind them that you sell multi-packs, so that if they've had it and they liked it, that they could then come back and purchase again? So all of this, I really do believe, is good customer service and part of creating that great experience. Because again, how often have you bought something and then had a really useful, timely email from somebody reminding you to refill, restock, and you've actually thought, oh, do you know what, this is great? It's interesting because when you look at the bigger businesses, a lot of what they're doing, especially people like the supermarkets, this is what they do day in, day out. It's a huge part of the backbone of their selling. So supermarkets, I remember having a chat with somebody who was running the IT, all of the IT systems for a major supermarket, and they were telling me that basically when it came to their loyal customers, anyone who was on their loyalty scheme, they know every single thing about you. They can tell when your kids go to university, when somebody's pregnant, when they've had a baby. They can tell when there's a divorce. They can tell when the in-laws move in for a bit. They basically almost have to disguise how much they know, because people obviously find it unsettling. But that's really what they're doing, is they're data mining. And so they have to walk the line between making these useful suggestions but not being creepy. So you don't want to go that far, but just making sure that you're thinking about what that might look like for your business and how you can then really tailor your conversations. Now, if you're a small business, that all this talk of big systems and data may feel really overwhelming, but just bring it back to individual customers. If you don't have hundreds of sales going through every day, then thinking about, okay, well, can I just look at my best customers and how often they buy? Can I look at what sort of patterns there typically are, and just really plan ahead and think about retargeting them in a timely, useful way, which I think is excellent customer service. I mean, if you think about it, going back to the idea of this being one of the core fundamental retail principles, if you like, I always think really great customer service, if you're going to a shop, for example, would be people making suggestions in a way that is helpful and useful. So just since we're nearly at the back to school time, thinking about buying kids school shoes, and that a good salesperson will say, do you have name stickers for the shoes? Do you have cleaning products for the shoes? Do you need plimsolls as well as trainers? And it certainly has happened to me before, where I've gone in to buy the school shoes and someone said, oh, have you got plimsolls for PE? And I've suddenly thought, oh my goodness, no, I haven't. So there's lots of ways that suggestive selling can be really, really positive and helpful to a customer. And I think it is part of an excellent customer service experience. Because again, if you went into a shop and you were working with a shop assistant and you purchased something and there was something that was useful and they didn't make any other suggestions, it would almost feel uncomfortable, or not uncomfortable, but I think it feels natural when they make suggestions. Now, if they're being pushy, that's one thing that feels uncomfortable, but you can do a lot of selling without being pushy. Okay, so on to point number 5 of how to create an extraordinary customer experience. Point number 5 is listen. So do ask your customers how they are feeling about their experience with you and your products. One of the best tips that I've seen is if you get sent a massive questionnaire after you've purchased something, the chances of you responding to it are pretty minimal. So what a lot of businesses will be doing, and you may have noticed this yourself when you've made a purchase, they will ask you one question. So they may say, how was your delivery experience? Or they may say, for example, I'm thinking about this cat food that I order for my cat, Neptune, and they send me an email periodically and they ask me what I think of one aspect of the food, or one particular, sometimes they ask me what I think of one particular flavour, which I find quite funny because of course I've no idea. The cat seems to like it. But they aren't asking me loads of questions. That it's really broken it down. So make sure you are checking in. It is one of the hardest things, getting feedback from people. I'm not going to lie and say that people will fall over themselves to give you feedback, but try small, tiny little surveys once every so often so that you're not overwhelming people and it's not a big ask. I know how important reviews are for small businesses, and I do try very hard to leave reviews when I make purchases. I just don't always have time. I just don't always have an opportunity to sit down and craft something meaningful. So maybe, again, could you give them the opportunity to give it a star rating, even if they don't have to write a review? What's the smallest ask that you can ask for in order to get some feedback from your customer? And if you've been trying and struggling, again, try thinking about if you can break it down. So do they have to just click one thing, for example? What would help you get information from them? And that's all part of the listening, which really brings me on to point number 6. So point number 5 is listen, and point number 6 is react. And that means react, especially if somebody has a problem. And don't be afraid of customer service problems, because a customer service issue is an opportunity for you to create a really positive customer service experience with your customers. And what I mean by that is, again, if you think about your own experience, mistakes happen, things break, parcels go missing, people have issues all the time, payments go through incorrectly, your system double charges everybody one day. I mean, it happens to multi-million pound companies, so it certainly happens to small companies. All these things happen. Most people, even if they're really cross about it, they will be placated, hugely placated, by somebody actually reaching out and trying to make it better. So if you've had a problem and the customer's really angry, then definitely don't be afraid to engage with them and try and find a solution. 99% of people will be so delighted that you've tried to make it up to them. 1% of people will just be really angry, and maybe they're having a bad day or a bad week or a bad year, who knows. But I would say the vast majority of people will be so appreciative of you trying to make things right that it will change their negative customer experience into a really, really super positive customer experience. So definitely make sure that you are seeing any issues as an opportunity to showcase just how dedicated you are to your business and just how far you're willing to go for your customers. So don't be afraid of them. And it's quite funny because when I think about customer service, I had an issue with a big retailer, and I'd ordered this piece of furniture, and it was, an expensive piece of furniture that I had sort of been planning on the purchase for a really long time, and it arrived and it was faulty. And what really made me cross was that it wasn't so much that it was faulty, because again, I understand these things happen, but it was really the lack of response from this major retailer. And again, a lot of the time I purchase from small businesses, and I know for a fact they are way more responsive than a lot of the big retailers. And it just was me wading through sort of call center after call center of people who weren't passing messages on or weren't getting back to me and all these kinds of things. It was an extremely frustrating experience. And in the end, I complained because it felt like it had gone on for such a long time. And there was somebody who called me, and it was just really funny because this person was obviously trained in dealing with really annoyed customers because they had this tactic. Now, there is a book that I recommend, whether or not you're a parent, it doesn't really matter, but it's not just been one of the most useful books for me in terms of being a parent, but one of the most useful books for me in terms of being just somebody who exists in the world. And that is called How to Talk So Your Children Will Listen, and How to Listen So Your Children Will Talk. And it is an absolutely brilliant book because it talks a lot about reflective listening. I don't want to kind of go into it in too much detail, but in a nutshell, and this is what the guy who from the major retailer was trained in, I could tell, because basically what he did was he let me complain, and instead of jumping in and trying to fix everything, he empathized with me. He said, that sounds like it was very frustrating. I can tell that you've had a really tough time with this. And as soon as he said that, even though I knew exactly what he was doing, it immediately calmed me down. And I just immediately felt like, okay, someone's actually listening to me. And most of the time when people are really frustrated about customer service, it's about them feeling like nobody's listening to them. So make sure not only do you listen to them in terms of trying to get their feedback on an ongoing basis, but when things go wrong, the other great thing about reflective listening is that it gives you, for me personally, it really reduced my fear of conflict, because what it means is that someone can call you and get really mad about something, and you can listen to them being mad, but you don't have to be confrontational. You don't have to try and argue with them. You can literally let them be mad, and you've got a toolbox, a way of reflecting back to them. Okay, that sounds very frustrating. I can understand how hard that must have been for you. And then once they've calmed down, to then be able to talk to them constructively. So How to Talk So Your Children Will Listen, How to Listen So Your Children Will Talk. Or it might be the other way around, I can't remember. But anyway, it's a great book, and it's really helpful when it comes to dealing with difficult people. So going back to creating an extraordinary experience, then really being able to deal positively with a negative experience is one of the best ways of doing it. So point number 7 then is about creating loyalty or rewarding loyalty. So this is about, we've talked about this in previous podcasts, but what incentives are there? If somebody's a loyal customer, what do you do for them? Can you give them percentage off if they've been to you 4 or 5 times? There's obviously reward schemes that you can build in. If you use an email system like Klaviyo, then that is brilliant for allowing you to segment and see the people who've purchased from you on an ongoing basis. But just really think about, how are you actually rewarding? What incentive is there for people to be a loyal fan? How are you showing them that you care? How are you showing them that you appreciate them? And I think rewarding loyalty doesn't have to be even financial all the time. It can just be a question of saying thank you, making them feel like a VIP. Something like free shipping, which obviously has a cost, but maybe isn't as big as a discount. That can all be ways of you really saying thank you and making that connection with your customer. Number 8 is creating super fans. And really everything that we've been talking about so far should be helping you create super fans. The super fans are the people who will share their user-generated content, so photos of themselves wearing something or using something. They'll recommend you to friends. They will buy whatever you put out, or they'll get on your waiting list and be the first to want to know about new things. All of these things, these are really the lifeblood of your business. So when you're creating this extraordinary customer experience, you also want to be, this is essentially the same thing. How can you make people into raving fans? So every interaction that you have, every conversation that you have, then the purpose is to think about then, okay, well, how am I talking to people in a way that is moving them more towards being a super fan of my business? Now, being proactive, listening to them, dealing with problems promptly, rewarding their loyalty, all of these things help. Saying hello, checking in afterwards, avoiding showing your frustrations, doing those little extra touches that maybe they weren't expecting. All of these things are so important. And just keep in mind throughout all of this, the purpose of an extraordinary customer experience is to create these super fans. So just make sure that you're always, every interaction that you have, you're thinking about moving them further along. And then the final point number 9, and I think this is really important, is communicate with your customers. And I think that this is really about setting clear expectations and clear boundaries. Talked a lot about boundaries last time, communicating things like the times that you'll be checking your emails, making sure that you're communicating again and again, order, dispatch dates, making sure that it's super, super clear for people. Although I know even when you make it super clear, lots of people won't read it, but you keep trying. If there are delays, making sure you let people know. If there are issues, that they're being made aware of these things. So, for example, I've been waiting for a package that my daughter pre-ordered back in February for a July delivery. It's a month late, and I've had to go chasing the company to find out where it is because the ETA was over a month ago. That is not a great customer experience. That is annoying. And eventually they came back. And eventually they sent out an email. But really, if something you're selling is delayed by a month, you've got to keep people updated. Most people won't mind. That's fine. Now we know it's delayed. We'll wait. We'll wait patiently. Most of the time people will wait patiently, but they don't like not being told about things. So I would say communicating and over-communicating if necessary about something is far preferable. And often a lot of frustration when people do have negative experiences. If you read negative reviews, a lot of the time, it's often to do with lack of response, lack of communication. It's not necessarily so much that there was a problem in the first place. It's usually the communication that makes people crazy. Incidentally, if you do get a negative review, just going back to that, always respond to it, to explain, I've been in touch. This is what I thought. This is what we've done to try and rectify this, because everyone gets negative reviews and most customers will read them and read your response and understand that you're a company that cares about your customers and that you've done things to make them right. So don't be afraid of negative reviews. Often there's a lot of research that suggests people are more trusting of reviews that includes the negative reviews because they know they're not being censored. And as long as there's a reasonable response, then they don't get too worried. So communication is absolutely key, and it's a really, really important part of creating an extraordinary customer experience. So there you have it, 9 ways to create an extraordinary customer experience. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I would love to know what you thought about it. Why not run over to Instagram at Resilient Retail Club, give me a follow, send me a message and let me know what's the best customer experience that you've ever had and what's the worst. And just think to yourself, it's always good. I think it's so important when you have a bad customer experience or a good one to really think about what that means for you and your business and how you want to do things or how you want to do them differently, and what's the kind of gold standard for you that you want to set out, because doing the right thing by your customers is a really great long-term strategy for you and your business, and it will never ever harm your business to treat your customer, each and every customer, as a potential super fan. If you have a moment to rate and review the podcast, that would be amazing. You can do so on iTunes, and I'm very grateful to everyone who does so. If you're on Spotify, you can also rate the podcast inside the app. Otherwise, like, subscribe, follow the podcast for the opportunity to be the first to know about every new episode. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, then I invite you to check out resilientretailclub.com. The Resilient Retail Club is the membership for anyone wanting to start, grow or scale a profitable product business. No more trawling Google trying to find the answers to your questions or wading through general business advice that speaks mainly to service-based businesses. Whether you're still at the idea stage or you've been going for a while but want to get more focused and organised when it comes to your business, the Resilient Retail Club is the place for you. With a library of courses tailored to creative product businesses, several live sessions a month, and a supportive and active community, the Resilient Retail Club is the perfect membership to help you hit your goals faster. Check it out at resilientretailclub.com.